What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, the married man. And today we're going to be talking about the New York Giants OTAs, recapping it because they're at the halfway point. Today they're having OTA 6, but 5 days of OTAs. A lot to take away from these practices so far. Of course, no pads on, just 7-on-7 drills, team drills, and individual drills on the sideline. But there's been some standout players, and a lot of these guys who you might not think of, kind of back end of the roster guys, starting to really make a name for themselves and hopefully push for the roster spots that will be handed out at the end of the offseason. So kind of exciting stuff coming out of Giants OTAs right now, and we're going to go ahead, recap, and discuss and react to all of that. But before we do, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts on the topic down below. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on Giants OTAs?
I'm doing fantastic. As Anthony mentioned, I was just recently married. I saw a lot of the comments congratulating me. I thank you all so very much, as always. Really appreciate you guys and all the love you showed. It meant a lot to me. And I love this community. And of course, she's a Giants fan automatically. She's been for 7 years now. We've been together for quite a while. So she's been a Giants fan this whole time against her will. She wasn't very much into sports, but dragged her to a lot of things. And now she has no choice. And she knows a lot of the Giants players despite not following the team, mainly because I podcast every day about this freaking team. And she basically overhears all of their names the whole day long. So she is being forced into Giants fandom, which I know you guys want to happen. So another one for the Giants. And as Anthony mentioned, it's been a busy couple of days with OTAs and a lot of players standing out. And what I like most is a lot of new players are standing out. Paris Campbell. And I want to talk about him first and foremost because he's a player the Giants brought in. And Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see him as a better version of Richie James for us in 2023. Richie James was kind of this agile, quick guy, good route runner, but he dropped some passes and he wasn't altogether like that great all the time, a little bit inconsistent. He dropped a lot of some punts and had a couple bad moments, but then he had a couple of really good moments. He was very reliable. Dalen Jones loved him. I think Paris Campbell can beat Richie James, but times 10. And I think he could be a lot better. He's faster. He's just as agile. He's athletically superior. And I think he's ultimately just a better football player. I think that the slant routes are going to be there. The quick routes are going to be there, but also the speed allows him to beat guys over the top, which I think is going to offer Daniel Jones a whole nother element out of the slot, attacking those seams. So, what are your thoughts on that? Paris Campbell's had a tremendous practice up to this point, or OTAs rather. And I think he could be a much better version of Richie James in 2023.
I think that's a great comparison, and I've never thought of it from that perspective because when you look at what Richie James's role was in the offense last year, a guy that we really slept on at the start of the year, he had some good practices around OTA time, kind of like this. Richie James was standing out at this point in the summer, and then he got around to the regular season, somehow made it onto the team, and found himself playing a lot more football than we ever expected him to be playing during the 2022 season. I think Paris Campbell, we expect him to play more than we expected from Richie James, but Paris Campbell is the better player. I think that's obvious. He's just more talented. He's faster. He has better hands. If he stays healthy, he could play that exact same role as Richie James and probably play it pretty well and earn himself maybe a second contract with the team. You guys know I'm very high on Paris Campbell. I loved the signing. I wanted the signing to happen before it even did happen. And it's very exciting to see that, he's standing out so far at OTAs. Darius Slayton was talking about him in an interview with Pat Leonard yesterday and just mentioned that he has a lot of speed, but he's built. He said that he's around 205 pounds. Like, he's stocky. He's not one of those fast, skinny guys. Like, he's well built. His frame is full, and he can do a lot of things after the catch, which should be music to Giants fans' ears. I know it was to mine. So I'm really excited about Paris Campbell. He's not the only receiver that's standing out, though, Alex. I know there's another guy that you wanted to talk about. 6'6", Colin Johnson has been having some really good practices. What are your thoughts on him so far, and why are you so excited by his development?
I mean, guys, if you remember Colin Johnson last year, he was killing it. He was primed to be a pretty big part of our wide receiver core before the ACL tear, and now he's fully is it ACL or Achilles, one of those two. I think it was ACL tear. But he comes back full strength now, and he's putting on a show again. And this is a 6'6" receiver. He's the tallest receiver in football, and the guy has some good traits. He has got some speed to him. He's got really good hands. The catch radius is obviously elite, with his massive arms like a pterodactyl, and I want to give him a fair opportunity to earn a roster spot. The Giants have a lot of wide receiver depth right now. A lot of guys who are going to be competing for roster spots on the back end. Still got Shep on the minimum deal. You got Khalil Pimpleton, who we're going to talk about. You bring in some guys that really are like Jamison Crowder and Jeff Smith. There's a lot of depth here that we just don't know how the roster is going to shake out. But Colin Johnson, he's not going to offer you much as a special teams guy. But who's to say he can't make this roster as a back end, like a wide receiver 5, and like make an impact and be a big body presence with some underrated speed to his game. Maybe he lands on the practice squad. I could totally see that happening as well. Maybe another team goes and grabs him if they have a weaker wide receiver unit. But we have a lot of like wide receiver 2s to wide receiver 4s. That range there, like we have so much depth in that area that I don't necessarily know who's going to come out with those jobs just yet. It's so early in the offseason. But I love Colin Johnson, the way he plays. I love to see him coming back from the ACL injury and coming back in full force. It's great to see him recovering and making an impact early in OTAs. What are your thoughts on him so far? Do you think he has a chance to make this roster?
I do think he has a chance to make the roster, and I think the size is a big part of it just because when you look at this Giants roster that you just mentioned, all these guys who wide receiver 2 to 4 range, but none of them are big body guys. They're all these real wiry slot receivers, route runners. Colin Johnson's different in the fact that he is 6'6" and he is a muscular, big bodied presence on the outside. So there is a chance for him to make the roster because of that alone. The Giants have plenty of slot guys. They might want to have some depth with those outside receivers, and Colin Johnson really does fit that role. He's been a starter in this league before. Don't even forget that when he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars, he was a pretty good starting level wide receiver. The Giants signed him hoping that he could be in their starting lineup at some point. Injuries held him back. Everything held him back, unfortunately, but this is a player I wouldn't sleep on. I think that he could have a role in the Giants offense this year. I mean, we know that Brian Dable is going to give everybody meaningful snaps if they deserve it. So if Colin Johnson continues to practice well, you'll see him on the field, and I think that he could add an element to this offense that is otherwise missing in terms of having that size presence on the outside at the receiver spot. But another wide receiver that you just mentioned, Alex, that I want to talk about is Khalil Pimpleton. Entering his second season, he was with the Giants all of last year on the practice squad, but this guy is a return specialist too. He won awards in college for his return specialism, and when you look at what he's been doing at OTAs right now, caught a touchdown pass from Daniel Jones, or from Tyrod Taylor rather, but then hauled in a deep pass down the right sideline from Daniel Jones. He's connecting with both of the quarterbacks. He's been finding ways to get open, and we know that he provides a lot after the catch and also after fielding a punt or kick return. So I think that this guy could make the roster, get off of the practice squad this year, and maybe be the Giants' starting return specialist for the upcoming season. What are your thoughts on that, and how excited are you by the fact that Khalil Pimpleton's kind of making a name for himself at Giants OTAs right now?
Listen, guys, the way I see Khalil Pimpleton is pretty simple. He's really freaking fast. He was really good for Detroit on the practice squad. Like he was making a name for himself during spring training, or rather, stuck in baseball mode. Stuck in in training camp, and obviously that didn't really pan out for him. But he was a fan favorite in Detroit. They loved him. The fans were calling for them to elevate him. But they had such a good wide receiver. James Williams coming back, and of course I'm on St. Brown. So they have a really good unit there, and their offense is pretty potent at times, and he just never got the shot. I'd love to see the Giants give him a chance, and like you said, he's been hauling in some deep passes, he's been making some waves early in OTAs, and don't forget, he's a kickoff specialist. He's a punt return specialist. Let's keep Adoree Jackson out of the punt return, guys. Let's just keep Adoree Jackson or CB1 off of that job. What do you say? I think that might be a pretty logical decision after what happened last season. Now you also look at guys like Paris Campbell. Would love to see him get some punt return opportunities. Jalen Hyatt, another guy. Love to see him get some punt return opportunities. But Khalil Pimpleton, he's the ideal punt returner, right? He's small, he's shifty, he's got good hands, he's a good receiver. Like he can do all those things for you, and he can get yards in those instances. So I'd love to give him a chance. I could see him making the roster, but again, a lot of depth, a lot of players there in that wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 4 range. So it could shake out. Like it could be between Johnson and Pimpleton. Like that could end up being where the Giants are trying to make a decision. And the special teams value may end up panning out to be the more probable, I guess more beneficial move, I could say. So Pimpleton does make a lot of sense if there was kind of like a determination between those two players, but we'll see how things develop. Darren Waller, another guy who's been standing out, one of our big acquisitions this offseason. He's been hauling in touchdown passes left and right. Daniel Jones and him have ridiculous chemistry already. Same with Isaiah Hodgins. He's been standing out at OTAs. Our receivers in general, like they look and feel so much better. I really label Darren Waller as a receiver because he's going to play most of his reps in the jumbo slot boundary role. So I'm kind of labeling as a receiver at this point in time. But just the reality is like our receiving talent has taken a big step forward, and Daniel Jones is slinging the rock around the field and looking good. I don't think they threw an interception, the offense threw an interception until yesterday. Zion Gilbert had an interception or something like that. So
So
pretty
they
impressive.
had one turnover in the first practice, and they didn't have another one until practice 5. But I do want to
Okay.
discuss some of these defensive backs that have been standing out here because I think that's something important that you mentioned. The Giants' offense has been great. What you mentioned with Darren Waller there, super exciting to see. I know Giants fans are probably going to lose their minds whenever Darren Waller and Daniel Jones connect on their first touchdown pass of the upcoming season. Isaiah Hodgins as well has really been standing out with Daniel Jones. They've been working hard, building that chemistry. Jones has been staying after practice to build chemistry with Jalen Hyatt, another storyline coming out of OTAs that's really exciting. But I want to flip over to the defensive side of the ball because, as you mentioned, there's been a couple defensive backs that have gotten their hands on the football. Deontay Banks has broken up a couple passes throughout practice. Zion Gilbert, as you mentioned, ended the drought of turnoverless days for the defense in OTA 5. But at OTA 1, somebody that really I'm excited about, Javarius Owens got the interception on Daniel Jones, rookie out of Houston, who I do really like. So, Alex, we haven't heard too much about guys like Adoree Jackson or the veterans in the defensive back group, but all of these young guys have really come to play at OTAs. You've got Zion Gilbert with a pick, you've got Javarius Owens with a pick, Deontay Banks with 2 pass breakups in 2 days. You're seeing a lot of these young defensive backs stand out here at practice and make some plays. That's exciting. I'm excited about that. But who are you keying in on? Like, who are you keeping a close eye on out of those young defensive backs? Other than Deontay Banks, we know he's going to be in the starting lineup this upcoming season. But some of these other guys that maybe haven't solidified themselves as a starter or even with a roster spot, who are you keeping an eye on and, getting excited by with OTAs going on?
I have three names for you guys: Cordell Flott, that's an obvious one, Darnay Holmes, and Aaron Robinson. Those are the three guys I'm watching very, very diligently. I think I'll throw a fourth one in, Nick McLeod. I kind of like him. I feel like he could be a decent reserve for us. But Aaron Robinson, the guy's got potential. We've seen it. He just keeps getting hurt. I think he could stand out and and be a decent slot or at least a decent reserve option at this point in time. Cordell Flott, he's been getting absolutely toasted. I've been seeing online. I've been checking in periodically during my wedding process, and I've been seeing Cordell Flott get toasted a little bit. So hopefully he steps it up. I have no doubt he will. I think it's just, OTAs are OTAs. Even some of the veterans get toasted at times. So it is what it is. But I do think that ultimately those are the three primary guys because that slot position is an open competition right now. It's an open battle. And one of those guys have to emerge as a starter. Like one of those guys has to come out as the starter there. I think it ends up being Cordell Flott because I think it's a Wink Martindale draft pick. I think he's one of those guys that they wanted to develop into this role. But I wouldn't sleep on Aaron Robinson. I really wouldn't. I think Darnay Holmes is maybe playing his way into potentially being cut at some point. I think there's $2.7 million there for the taking. And I think that's a good chunk of change. You can go out and sign Justin Houston. Like there's a guys out there that could provide value in other places with that money. And Darnay Holmes, while he's a great guy, like awesome dude. Like can't say anything bad about him personally. He just has struggled in coverage, and unfortunately, he's a cornerback, so you can't really live with that at times. And he's been great against the run. He's been great again in diagnosing plays behind the line of scrimmage. He's really good in some areas of his game, but his coverage capabilities have been lackluster at times. Unless he takes a big step forward, I do think he's in danger of being released and utilizing that cap space elsewhere. But those are my three primary DBs that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. But I wouldn't leave out Nick McLeod. I do think he's a good player that I'm certainly watching as well.
Yeah, I think that Javarius Owens is a guy that I'm keeping an eye on. Again, he had an interception in day one of OTAs, and this is a young guy with a lot of potential. Some analysts were writing about him after the draft, saying the Giants might have actually drafted a starter in the 7th round with Javarius Owens. He had a 4th round projection, and so when you look at that, and you look at the Giants stealing him in the 7th round, this is a player with the potential to one day take over as a starter in the Giants defense. So that's something that I'm excited about, hoping to see him develop and get some playing time this upcoming season as a rookie. I think that would be some good stuff for the Giants defense. But it's also worth noting there are a few other players who've been absent from the drills. Dane Belton working on the side, Sterling Shepard working on the side, a few other guys who are in rehab, just recovering and preparing for training camp over in July. But right now, there's a lot of excitement coming out of Giants OTAs. There's some players that are really standing out. Some of these young guys, stars like Darren Waller, looking like stars. it's exciting stuff, and I can't wait for these practices to continue and for the New York Giants to hopefully, get themselves ready for preseason and hit the ground running once the regular season rolls around. And of course, right here on Fireside Giants, we will be providing you with all of the updates throughout the summer covering the New York Giants. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Leave a like if you did enjoy this episode, and of course, comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.